All right, everyone, the new Frankenstein movie is out, and I'm very excited because I get to talk about my favorite director, Guillermo del Toro. I'll get into what I specifically love about Guillermo del Toro later in the video, but first, we'll get right to the movie. From what I understand, this is one of the closer adaptations to the book, and I read the book so long ago that I really don't remember all that much of it to compare. So I'm just going to be talking about the movie as just a self-contained unit. It's broken up into 3 parts where you get a prelude, and then you have Victor Frankenstein's story.
It's pronounced Frankenstein.
And then you have the monster story. So the movie starts with this Arctic expedition. There's a giant ship that's stuck in the ice. The crew is getting very disheartened. Without tons of dialogue, you're already understanding how perilous this is, how disheartened the men are, and why they all just want to give up and go home. They're trying to get to the North Pole. And as we all know, this is a very unforgiving part of the world. But suddenly, off in the distance, there's an explosion and a fire. And when they go to explore it, they find a man near death. And this is Victor Frankenstein.
That's Frankenstein.
They bring him aboard the ship, and of course he starts raving about a monster, and no one really believes him because they think it's just a part of his injuries, maybe a fever or something like that. And that's when he begins telling his story. We start when he's very young. We see that he's very close to his mother, who is heavily pregnant. And we meet his father, played by Charles Dance, who is a very cold man. Everything is about image and perfection, carrying on the family name. He is a doctor, so now, of course, his son is going to be a doctor. And when his mother passes away in childbirth, Victor decides he is going to conquer death. You have this section where Victor is trying to promote this idea of being able to stop death, which of course ostracizes him from the medical community. And this is where we meet the Christoph Waltz character. He ends up being Victor's benefactor, as well as being the father of the woman that Victor's brother is going to marry. This kind of leads into one of my few criticisms of the movie, where I didn't feel that Christoph Waltz was all that necessary. And that's nothing to do with him or his performance. I quite like him. He's the money man who may or may not have a nefarious reason for funding all of Victor's research into this particular project. I did read one review where the critic said basically Christoph Waltz's character was in there as like a critique of capitalism. And I do agree with that. I think it's a criticism of just unfettered capitalism and having these millionaires, and in our day billionaires, who are funding projects that are not for the betterment of the world, or that they actually care about anyone that they're funding or the people that are working on these projects, but they're simply doing it as a way to become, if not literally immortal, to have their name achieve immortality. So I do see him being representative of that. And yes, we do need to see how Victor did get his money. It needs to come from somewhere. I mean, even though he is a baron, he wouldn't have been able to fund all of this all on his own. So really the character just ended up being more just undercooked than unnecessary. Now that I'll go back on what I just said. Like, I get why he's there, but they just didn't do a whole lot with him. And this critique also can be applied to the character of Elizabeth, who's played by Mia Goth. She is wonderful. I'm a huge fan of hers. And she plays Victor's brother William's fiance, Christoph Waltz's daughter. And for reasons I'll get to in a minute, she is kind of, like the moral center of the story, like the conscience of the story. But on the other hand, much like Christoph Waltz, was just underbaked. There were moments where she pushed things along, but she really only seemed to be there for that reason. And not that I want to get into book comparisons. She's not as much of a figure in this retelling as she is in the book. If you are looking for the most faithful adaptation, at least of the ones I've seen of the book, that would be Kenneth Branagh's Frankenstein, which has its good and its bad. I found it to be okay. It's a well-made movie, but in terms of the story, that one tells it closest. So we see Victor procuring everything that he needs to do his experiments. He has this wonderfully Gothic laboratory where you have these giant electrical, they're not really coils, really just these giant vats of electricity to be conducted. Del Toro never misses with his visuals. His visuals are always stunning. And of course, this one comes complete with the old Gothic castle. If you're going to have a movie about Frankenstein and his monster, you are going to have a creepy old Gothic castle. And this one delivers. And obviously, this isn't a spoiler. His experiment is a success. And this is where we really see how amazing Oscar Isaac's performance is in this. Because he goes for someone who, even though you know the story and you know where it's going to go, in a weird way, you're sympathetic towards him. You're like, he really believes in this. He's driven by this need because he lost his mother. But then after the creature is created and it's not going as smoothly as he wanted it to, you just see him do this turn, and you see how he was treated by his father is now how he is going to treat the monster. He does not see the monster as a human, even though he is all made of human parts. He calls it it. He doesn't call it he. He is abusive, verbally and physically. So you kind of go from, he's misunderstood and yeah, he's doing this kind of creepy thing to, okay, you are a monster. And that will lead to another one of my mild criticisms, is that we all know, even if you've never read it, even if you've never seen any of the movies, we know that the theme of the story is, who's the monster? And that there was actually dialogue that was a little too on the nose for me when, you're literally calling Oscar Isaac a monster. We get it. You don't need to go that just ham-fisted with it.
Oh, I get it.
And the monster is played by Jacob Elordi, who is fantastic. I read some articles saying how he would be in makeup depending on how much of his character was seen. Like if he's just wearing the cloak and you're just seeing kind of half of the face and his hands, that alone took 6 hours. But when you're seeing him just in basically like a loincloth, that was 11 hours of makeup. And this is a very innocent form of the monster. At one point, Elizabeth finds him in the castle, and you see how she is very patient with him. She's horrified by what has been done, but she knows that it is not his fault. He did not ask for this. Frankenstein is the one playing God. She takes time out of her day for him. He gives her little presents, and she really sits with him and tries to maybe get him to say a few words, showing him this is how the throat moves when we talk. This is how we make this sound. Meanwhile, Victor is absolutely raging at his creation because the only word it can say is Victor. And again, it's not learning as fast as Victor wants it to. And this enrages him. This is where we get to the part of the movie that is from the monster's point of view. Victor has decided he's done with this. This is a complete failure, and he's going to literally burn it all down with the monster inside. And because of the way Guillermo del Toro shaped the story, I do have an issue calling him the monster, even though that is what he's always referred to as. But now the monster is alone, and there is one person he knows who is responsible for this. And now all his focus and anger is in finding Victor.
Frankenstein.
So he emerges from the ruins, determined to find Victor and cause him as much misery and suffering as he can. Along the way, he sees this cabin in the woods, and it is a family, mother, father, kids, and their blind grandfather, who is played by David Bradley. Wonderful performance. And here, Victor hides out to get stronger after what he's been through. And as he's hiding in this part of the barn, he is able to see into the house where the kids are learning reading and writing. And through this, he learns how to speak. So this is not the same Frankenstein's monster that we've seen like in the Universal Boris Karloff movies. And don't get me wrong, those are great. But this is in line with the book. Or also, if you have watched the show Penny Dreadful, that had probably the most beautiful, just tragic versions of the monster I've ever seen. It's played by Rory Kinnear. It is amazing. And that actually is probably my top Frankenstein's monster performance. Check it out if you haven't seen it. But most of the family has to leave for a time, which leaves only the blind grandfather in the cabin. And of course, he's known all along that the monster was there. And in one of just the most really beautiful parts of the story, you see the relationship between the blind old man and the monster, and he has his first true friend. And yeah, it brought some tears to my eyes a couple times. It was just so beautifully done. It was so beautifully acted. I myself am a sucker for a relationship between two people where one is one age, but the other person is from like a few generations older, like a grandparent type figure. Though that will always just hit me. So they spend all this time together, and you see the monster learning that it, not only what he learned from Elizabeth, but now with this blind old man, that not everybody is out to get him. He knows he has to be careful, but he has seen what else is possible. Unfortunately, he is driven away from this home and is now further dedicated to finding Victor. They find each other in the Arctic, and then you have the confrontation between the creator and his creation. So a simple story, but an effective one, especially in the hands of a writer-director like Guillermo del Toro. So really, my critiques are few and far between. It really was just the overuse of the, who's a monster, like literally said. I didn't feel that was necessary. And just a couple of characters that I didn't feel were really used to their full potential, but still well done. That's not a criticism of the actors. There was also some really heavy-handed metaphor. Not a lot, but in particular, there was like a butterfly like in a glass cage, and using that as a metaphor for Elizabeth's feelings. That was a little on the nose for me.
I get it.
But here are the things that I really did like. First of all, the music was amazing. And then, of course, when I found out that the composer was Alexander Desplat, I got it. I think all movie scores need more harpsichord and more timpani. Again, the monster creature design was fantastic. Stripped down, it wasn't a busy look. And I really liked the way Jacob Elordi used his hands. It was unnatural, but delicate. Really kind of like the way his character is portrayed in this retelling. And Oscar Isaac, I know I haven't said a lot about his performance, but he really worked that character arc. Because like I said, in the beginning, you do pity him. You know what he went through as a child. And even as he starts going through the experiments, you can see, this dangerous fervor just starting to form, but there is still that sympathy. And then just to completely turn, as he gets more obsessive, but then in his treatment of what he has created. So you just ride this roller coaster, and it's a great journey. And you get to see him naked. I mean, that was a bonus for me. And we're going to go from that to my nerdy side, where I really liked a lot of the nods to Greek mythology. Because the subtitle of Frankenstein is The Modern Prometheus. So it's not a lot, and it's not overused, which I liked. But in particular, Christoph Waltz says something about wanting to be the eagle that eats the liver. And that comes directly from the Prometheus myth. Don't worry about it, I'm just being a nerd. And about a third of the movie is set in the Arctic, and that setting alone is its own character, because it's affecting the action. It's why this crew has found Victor. and it's impeding them trying to get away from the creature. And the last thing I'll say about the movie is the violence. Guillermo del Toro has this way of using violence just as this punctuation. He's like Scorsese in that way. They don't use it in the way like your average horror movie does, where you're looking at it and you're going, oh, hey, that was kind of cool. It was kind of gross, but it was kind of cool. When you see violence in a Guillermo del Toro movie, it's visceral. It's made so you feel how brutal that is. So when you see the monster tearing his way through people, it's not pretty. It's not like, oh, hey, that was neat. I mean, it was neat in how they did it, but you don't have that. It's not the same feeling as when you're watching, something like Nightmare on Elm Street. There's just such a cold brutality to the violence. And especially in this film, it is all the better for that. And before I get into why I love Guillermo del Toro so much, I am going to recommend one movie. Now, if you've seen any of my other videos, you know I'm a found footage fan. So if that's not your thing, that's okay. But I will recommend the Frankenstein theory. Like I said, it is found footage, but it is about this young man who basically discovers that Frankenstein wasn't fiction. It was actually based on something, I believe, like that his great-grandfather had done. So, he takes the film crew and, of course, they go up north to investigate this. And I find it interesting just because there aren't a whole lot of winter found footage movies. But I just thought this one was very well done. I thought it was an interesting plot. So if you kind of want to continue with some Frankenstein lore, check this out if you're into the found footage. It seems odd to say, but Guillermo del Toro is a director that I feel seen by. And I don't mean that in a way where I feel like I know him, because obviously I don't and I never will. And I don't even mean in like a parasocial relationship kind of way. I just mean he is someone that I feel sees things similar to the way I do, and the way he presents them on screen just speaks to me. We've got Guillermo right there. I know it seems trite to say, the monsters aren't who we think they are. But until really humanity learns that lesson, till we all learn that lesson, it's always going to be explored in movies. We say that we know this, but mankind really doesn't. I mean, we see it because pretty privilege exists. You can see this in the way people who are not conventionally attractive or conventional looking are treated. You're more likely to assume something bad of someone like that than someone who is societally beautiful. Obviously, we don't all do that. I'm not going to say this is true, obviously, for every single person. But in the grand scheme of things, as long as we keep basing opinions on people's level of attractiveness or not, this will always be relevant. Maybe it speaks to me because of, past trauma that I've had where I have felt like a monster, but just because of how I felt inside due to, verbal and psychological abuse. His work just really means a lot to me. I just like the way he sees things. I like the way, like I said, with the way he depicts violence. He's not going to make it pretty for you. He's going to hold up this mirror and he's going to make you see all the beauty and all the ugly things that are out there. And these things aren't necessarily what you think they are. Through his movies, he shows life for what it is. All this beauty, all this hardship, all this ugliness. He holds up this mirror and says, this is what we're doing. This is what is happening. And he has such passion for what he does. He's not going to cut corners. He just came out and basically said AI is trash, which it is. He is one of our greatest living directors, in my opinion. Not just because of the movies, but how he goes about making them. There's just such artistry and just care. He cares about what he's doing, which all directors do to some degree. But he really cares about the art of making. I would put him up there, someone like Steven Spielberg, who this is an art to him, not just something to slap on the screen. We saw it this year with Ryan Coogler and Sinners. But, here we see someone who is elevating the art form, really cares about what they're doing. And I want more directors like that. Even if you don't have a big budget, you don't need to. I just like when I can feel the heart that goes into making something. And that doesn't come with having a big studio behind you. Sometimes that's more of a hindrance than anything. But I appreciate Guillermo del Toro for his artistry, for his passion, and just the fact that he's willing to really look at things. And that can be a lot of the movie-going experience. So, Guillermo del Toro, you will never ever see this, but thank you for what you've done. It means more to me, and I know a lot of other people than I could ever say. So those are my thoughts on the new version of Frankenstein. I give it 4 top hats. I'm happy I was able to catch it during its short theatrical run. I mean, I could wait. It comes out on Netflix on November 7th. So let me know if you've seen it or if you're looking forward to seeing it. What's your favorite Guillermo del Toro movie? Mine is Pan's Labyrinth. That is just an absolute masterpiece. Thank you to everyone who has been liking, subscribing, commenting. It all helps. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. I'll catch you in the next video. And remember, like what you like, don't be a dick. And empathy is a superpower.